Recording in progress.
Okay, hi, I'm Samantha Page. I work with the Bennington County Regional Commission, and my colleague Callie Fishburne is also here tonight. I'm here to talk about a future land use mapping project that's underway throughout the region and throughout the state. And it dovetails with your town plan update. So there's certainly overlap, and that's a large part of why I wanted to be on the agenda as soon as possible. But this material that I'm going to talk through is something that we're meeting with every planning commission in the region about over the next year. And so it's both relevant to the sort of immediate needs of Manchester and also part of a long-term regional planning effort. So I'll sort of give a little bit of context, and then I have some map drafts to look at, and hopefully we can have a discussion about where they are right now. So the future land use mapping is coming out of the recent Act 181 that the state signed into law this summer. So it's a requirement that all of the regional planning commissions throughout the state participate in this future land use sort of process with methodology that has been defined in part by statute and by some planners throughout the state. And the goal is to create uniformity in the land use maps that every regional planning commission puts together throughout all of Vermont. So right now, each of the 11 RPCs has been creating a future land use map in their regional plans using their own categories. And the outcome of this is to have the same categories agreed upon by all of the regional planning commissions, so that when you look at the future land use map of the Bennington region or Addison County or Chittenden County, you have the same terminology and the same categories to understand how those areas are planning for the future. And so these are the 10 categories. So there are centers that includes both downtown and village centers. Planned growth areas, which are more of the sort of still higher density mixed use areas around a center. Village areas are similar. They're kind of the settled areas, historic settled areas around a village center, but maybe lower density and with less intention for growth than a planned growth area. Transition and infill areas are, I think one of the intentions in that category is to have areas that are strip developments right now transition into more desired patterns of development, or also identifying areas that could see more infill, could see more strategic development, but maybe don't have the infrastructure in place right now. So you're sort of identifying potential, but doesn't have all of the pieces it would need to be built out at the moment. Resource-based recreation areas are mostly going to be ski resorts, like very large scale natural resource based areas that are also centers of employment or commercial activity. Enterprise areas are like industrial areas that are sort of outside of core growth areas. And then there are 3 rural categories. So there's sort of a general rural, which is like rural residential, lower density residential areas, the rural agricultural and forested lands, and then a rural conservation category that aligns more with like protected natural resources. And then there's sort of 2 big areas of implications that come out of this updated land use mapping, and that's related to Act 250 and then also related to revised designation programs. So to start, the Act 250, part of the goal of Act 181 was to sort of revise Act 250 and create strategic exemptions that would help make development in desirable areas more feasible. And so sort of one of the ways of doing that is to carve out these exemptions that are related to the centers and the planned growth areas that are identified in this mapping process. So there are 4 tiers. I'm sorry, I apologize in advance. It's going to get very jargony and it's not, it can be confusing. So please feel free to jump in if you have questions, but these are called tiers, and there's sort of tier 1A, which is the most exemptions from Act 250. And so this tier says that any development, subdivision, or permit changes related to Act 250 permitting would be exempt within the area that has been identified as tier 1A. And to pursue this, the area would have to be identified in the future land use map as either a center or a planned growth area. And then the municipality would have to apply to this new land use review board for that status of tier 1A. Tier 1B has some exemption, but it's a little bit less. So it exempts housing projects that are 50 units or fewer on 10 acres of land or less. And it also exempts mixed use developments. And this has a similar process of regional planning commissions submitting a request to the land use review board at the request of the municipality. So it again would have to be identified in the future land use map and then initiated by the municipality if you want to pursue that exemption in certain areas of the town. Tier 2 has no exemptions from Act 250. And then there's a tier 3 that identifies critical resource areas, which would be very much protected from development. And there will be rulemaking that comes down for determining those areas, but that rulemaking has not been determined yet, and it's not based on the future land use mapping. So it's really not, we don't have to focus on it tonight because it's still sort of being ironed out at a larger level. So the big takeaway is that in the conversation we're going to have today about map drafts, that areas identified as centers and planned growth areas can be considered for exemptions to Act 250. So if you're interested in pursuing that in certain parts of Manchester, it will be important to have those identified and included in centers and planned growth areas. Okay, and then there's a separate section called steps, and this is where it gets unnecessarily confusing and jargony. But this is related to the designation program. So currently, Manchester has a designated village center. It seems like in the past, there's been some interest in potentially pursuing a downtown designation. Those are now being folded into this new process that's also coming out of Act 181. And so there are 3 steps that are sort of progressive levels that unlock more benefits for the municipality and more incentives for businesses or advantages in grant application processes. So all areas that have been mapped as village or downtown centers in this future land use mapping process will automatically be considered step 1. And I'll go through the benefits on the next slide, but those are sort of being seen more favorably in certain state grant application processes and things like that. Areas that have existing designated village centers, so the current designated village center boundary of Manchester would be automatically considered for step 2. And the benefits are similar to the current village designation program. I think because you have one currently, it would automatically be folded into that, but other municipalities would need to apply for pursuing that. And then step 3 is more similar to the downtown designation program that currently exists. And if you were interested in pursuing a downtown, like designate, or step 3, you would need to apply. Yes. Have I said something confused? Yeah. Oh, sorry. Oh, I thought you had your hand raised. Okay,
No.
sorry. Okay, I'll keep going.
Thinking with my hands.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. So these are sort of the progressive benefits of the different steps. So step 1, which again is any area that is mapped as a center in this future land use mapping process gets assistance in that designated area, could be eligible for tax credits, could participate in the Better Places grant application, and other priority for state grant opportunities. Step 2 includes all of that and then also has additional benefits like funding priority, authority to create special taxing districts, priority consideration for different kinds of funding. So yeah, continues to add more benefits than the initial step. And my understanding is that because Manchester currently has a village center designation, that you would be entering at step 2. And then if you wanted to consider step 3 in order to achieve more benefits for the area, you could pursue that, and that would come with additional funding, possible opportunities for further accreditation with different organizations, offsite signage exemptions. And this is kind of the condensed version of the list, but I hope it gives a sense of sort of the progressive benefits and incentives offered by these different steps.
I got a question for you.
Mhm.
What would off-site signage, what would be an example of that?
I'm trying to think. I guess,
Billboard? I mean,
so it's not a billboard, but it's related to the billboard laws in the state, which my understanding is have very strict restrictions on signage that is.
yeah, it's very strict, so it's confusing to have it on there. Because we already are prohibiting off-site signage.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what the language that I have is that it offers placemaking, wayfinding, offsite signage exemptions under the billboard law. I'm sure it's not just a blanket exemption, but I think probably allows for like branded downtown wayfinding within certain areas that maybe would otherwise be excluded.
Okay,
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either.
Yeah, but I can,
Jonathan has a question.
oh, okay.
Jonathan, do you have a question?
Yeah. Sorry, quick question, and this is actually not me with the planning commission, or it's not with the housing task force, but with the select board. You mentioned the eligibility for sales tax reallocation. Is that based on for the development, like the downtown development core, like that district could get you could reallocate sales tax dollars as part of the local option taxes, or is this anything additional? And then is that part of a separate process than currently what means they go into the sales tax or the taxpayer relief fund? I'm just curious if you knew anything about that.
I'm not sure. I can look into it and let you know. I'm sorry, I just have sort of the
You're good.
concise version. I do have the statutory reference if that's helpful at all. But yeah, I was just referring to sort of the condensed summary of the new legislation. So I'm not sure off the top of my head.
Sure. And just one further clarification, you on the previous slide,
Mhm.
based on the first step, the step one, Manchester and its village designation, that will automatically be approved. If the town so wishes, based on what I'm gathering here, to move to a step two, which allows all those additional benefits, that
My
would be
unders-
something that would be the municipality would have to apply, or is that something that's automatic as well?
My understanding is that because you have an existing village center designation, you're automatically considered for step two. And so that would be, there might still be, I don't think the process has been finalized yet, but I think that would be sort of the way that they're migrating the current designation program over to this new step program. And then if the municipality is interested in step three, that would require an additional application and meeting those requirements. Because you don't currently have a downtown program.
Correct.
Question
Thank
just
you.
to follow up on that. Samantha, so with respect to the tiers and now the steps, the certain ones that the town has to opt in on, what is the timeline for that? Is there a deadline? Is it like on a rolling basis whenever the town feels that they want to participate?
Yeah, so the timeline, I guess most pressingly is that if you're interested in pursuing some of these things, it would be prudent to put them in the town plan update. So that's sort of the most urgent piece. And it doesn't have to be, like, there are certain requirements for elements to have in place. Those don't need to be in place, but the town plan should reflect an interest in pursuing
Okay.
one of these, or like step three if you're interested in step three, or tier 1A if you're interested in tier 1A, and just sort of identifying it and saying this is something that the town wants to work towards. But I think for both the steps and the tiers, it will have to wait for the land use review board's approval of the entire region's map, which probably won't happen until the end of next year.
Oh.
And so it's sort of, the timeline is both, and I mean, yeah, trying to have these conversations now and identifying what direction you want to move in. But the land use review board has not met yet.
Right.
So the sort of process for reviewing and approving the maps is still, yeah, a little ways away.
And then since you brought up the town plan, how much of this presentation, maybe it's for Callie, is going to be incorporated in your revision of the current town plan with respect to these land use maps?
Yeah, so in the drafts that we've been working on, I've tried to spell out some of the benefits of, I mean, sort of including some of these benefits in the draft and also including some of the requirements. So that if you say, yeah, we want to do step three, that's our long-term goal, that if that's what we hear from you, then we would include that in the draft of the plan so that it's clearly articulated what pieces of, like, for example, there's a requirement to have certain downtown improvement plans or investment agreements. And if there are pieces of those requirements that you don't currently have in place, but you want to work on, putting that in the plan will be helpful to getting additional support for working on those things. And then in terms of the maps, I think our hope is that that the land use maps in the town plan will reflect the drafts that I'll show you tonight and any feedback you have on them, so that the land use plan maps in your town plan will be updated and yeah, reflecting sort of the direction that you want to see the town moving in.
And last question, are you going to circulate this presentation?
Yeah, yeah, and I have some hard copies of the maps too, but I can circulate the PDF of the
That
presentation.
would be wonderful. Thank you very much.
Yeah, there's.
Joanne O'Connor has her hand up.
Yes. Hi, yeah, I'm on the Housing Task Force and I wanted to ask a question about these designations. And I understand you're migrating the existing ones to these new ones. In addition to the village, we have a neighborhood designation.
That's
So
right.
how does that fit into how this is gonna work?
Yeah, so they're phasing out the neighborhood development area in the designation program. But it is sort of a part of the methodology for determining the boundary of the planned growth area, which would be part of the Act 250 exemption area. So the neighborhood development area that you currently have is something that we took into consideration when I drafted these new boundaries. And so it's reflected in the sort of broader planned growth area. And I would say the sort of intention behind the neighborhood development area to identify places that can accommodate more housing and accommodate greater development, and have more walkable, bikeable areas. All of those sort of values and intentions are also reflected in the planned growth area sort of goals as well, and the footprint as well. And I'll show them, I can show the map
Okay. All right.
too.
So that would possibly extend further out then than the limitations of the neighborhood area.
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
correct. Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Steve Nichols, you have your hand up.
Oh, you're
You-
muted.
You're muted.
Steve, you're muted.
I can. Or I can ask him that.
Unmute. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I have a couple things. I'll go through them and then you can respond if you would. I want to know why BCRC wants to dictate what our zoning processes are and will be. And my initial assumption of the purpose of BCRC was it was originally designed to assist the towns, if they requested advice, not be dictated of what to do. And in looking at some of this process, and I haven't seen the different tiers, but I think the town really needs to look at these and be really careful and get opinions from the taxpayers rather than just move ahead as you are saying that it's very confusing and jargoning to you. How do you think the taxpayer might feel?
Yeah, it is jargony. These are requirements from the state that have been adopted and signed into law. And so I see BCRC's role in the process as trying to distill all of these requirements that we've been given and help Manchester and all the other municipalities that we serve in adopting town plans and zoning bylaws that are compliant with those requirements. I hope that we can help, by putting this presentation together, by circulating it, that we can help like break down the jargon and have an understanding of what the goals are. And our role is to just help the municipality stay in compliance with the state's laws and do so in a way that still reflects your values and the vision that you have for your community. So I agree that it shouldn't be us telling you what to do. That's also why we're here tonight, is to share a draft and to get your feedback. And hopefully that feedback can also be aggregated from community members, and that you can continue to get input on those maps before they're finalized. But I hope that it's not seen as us coming in and telling you what to do, but we're just trying to help stay compliant with state laws and do so in a way that's still driven by what you want.
And we have to pay for this?
Well, the municipalities we work with pay dues to BCRC as sort of a part of the Regional Planning Commission structure. So I'm here tonight in that capacity as a sort of our role as a liaison between you and the state, and as a part of your Regional Planning Commission, not in the capacity of the work that we're also doing for the town plan.
So the BCRC has also asked for, I believe, $34,000. Is that correct?
Steve, that wouldn't be part of Sam's responsibility, so I don't think it's worth trying to cover it now. But we can certainly answer that question at a later date. I'm going to move on to Paul Caraccio now.
Thanks, Wilbur, and appreciate all the BCRC is doing. I don't recognize the person speaking, but I do have a question of kind of a bigger picture. If the town does not follow the suit or plan proposed and it's not accepted by the regional commission, and then it sort of goes to this land use board, can you explain the process of what happens if it goes to a board? And then can you also name the board members that the governor just appointed last week?
So I think the town plans I don't think they'll go to the land use review board. So this process there's a lot of overlap, but the future land use map is part of a regional plan update that we now need to do for 2026 in order to be compliant with the new Act 181 law. And the regional plan future land use map that will cover all of the municipalities we work with, that is what will go to the land use review board for their review and their ultimate approval for all of the Bennington County Regional Commission service area. If the town plan separately is not compliant with state law, which I guess is what you're asking, if that doesn't meet the new requirements from the Home Act or some of the forest block elements that are required now, I suppose we wouldn't be able to approve it as a regional planning commission if it wasn't in full compliance with those requirements. But I don't think it would go to the land use review board after that. I'm not sure what would happen do you know the process if it's not compliant?
Can I ask a question related to that? You just said that if there are certain inconsistencies or deficiencies in the process of redoing the town plan, that you, as a regional planning commission, wouldn't be able to approve it. I wasn't under the impression that the town plan has to be approved by you. It has to be approved by the community and then the select board, and then put into place. It's not a function of the BCRC to approve the town plan.
We have to confirm the planning process for the town. So, you know, at the end of the road, so just switching gears slightly to talking about the town planning in general. You know, once the planning commission has had their hearing on the town plan and sent it to the select board has had their required 2 public hearings, and then the select board adopts the town plan. Then it is sent to BCRC and we review and just confirm that the town plan meets all of the statutory requirements, and we confirm, I believe the official term is we confirm the planning process by vote of our commission, and that is just certifying that the town plan meets all of the statutory elements that have to be included in a town plan. So ultimately, the town does adopt, and it is the authority of the select board to approve the town plan for Manchester, and then we confirm the planning process for the town of Manchester.
Kelly, if it's not confirmed, then the town is not eligible for like certain grants, right?
I think it would depend on the grant, but like, for example, an MPG, municipal planning grant, the municipality has to have a confirmed planning process. I believe that's the specific language in the MPG. This program description is, does the municipality have a confirmed planning process? As of right now, Manchester does. And, you know, this is just one of the roles that a regional planning commission plays for all of our municipalities is confirming municipal plans and confirming that they meet required statutory elements. So it's not, it's a technicality of language. It's not so much an approval, it's a confirmation, but you know, sometimes.
Thank you.
use them
Yeah. Sorry,
interchangeably,
sorry.
But
Yeah.
And, you know, we're still trying to navigate this new, you know, requirements for Act 181. You know, I think we're just really trying to start the conversation early so that we have, you know, time to discuss this with all of our municipalities. So we appreciate your patience as we're navigating and learning the new law along with you.
Thank you. You want to continue now?
Sure. Are there any other questions? Okay.
Nobody else? Oh, wait a minute. Paul has his hand up again.
I just didn't have the second part of my question answered. Who is the new land use board made up of?
So there's 5 people who were appointed. I don't know their names off.
I have the list.
Oh.
I can read it off.
Thank you.
So Janet Hurley is the chair, Alex Weinhagen, Brooke Dingledine, Kirsten Sultan, and Sarah Hod.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's still there.
Okay. So this is a draft, and I'll actually pass out some hard copies. There should be enough for everyone in the room.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, to reiterate,
Yep.
Thank you so much.
thank you. This is a draft of a future land use map for the town of Manchester based on the categories that now will be used throughout the state. And I guess I'm hoping that our conversation tonight can focus mostly on the sort of central area in town. And we can certainly talk about other areas, but I think in terms of particularly getting feedback on the planning commission's interest in some of these different approaches to the exemptions from Act 250 and the designations, it would be helpful to have input on the boundaries we've drafted for the downtown village center in particular, and then the planned growth area as well. So that's sort of the dark maroonish color and then the light pink color. And so as you can see here, the dark black outline shows the current boundaries of the village center as it's currently designated. So you can see there's one in Manchester, and then there's also one in Manchester Village, which we won't focus on because that's not what we're discussing. But as you can see, the current boundary sort of starts on the western end at the roundabout, and then really is just focused on the historic core of the downtown area or the village center area. It includes the school, and it stops to the east, sort of just short of where the Manchester Community Library is now.
Does it include the green? It extends beyond the town green? I can't tell by how far out does it go past?
Yeah, I can actually pull up, the map itself.
So it includes Crystal Palace, the existing village designation, Carolyn.
Okay, so I'll just go back to,
So Callie, I'm confused. Were there changes made by VCRC in the boundaries of the different existing zones?
so this, it's based off of your zones, but we are recommending extending the center to include. It doesn't match the zoning one-to-one because the categories are a little bit different, but we're recommending extending beyond the current village center to show sort of a broader reflection of the downtown that I think does reflect the sort of mixed use zoning that is currently in place in Manchester. It's just not reflected in the village center boundary right now.
Why would you change the village zoning or the village zoning components, the different boundaries of the different areas without our input? And you're, wait a minute, you're saying now I'm having it, but we're having input. But why make changes when this is part of what we've determined the town wants? Why are you coming in here and saying, we want to change these? You just said that you're not telling us how to do our town plan. Why would you want to tell us that you think we need to change our zones when we've done a lot of work on this?
Yeah, this is based on the zoning that you have in place. I can't use the same category names that you have in your zoning because of the requirement to use these category names. But the idea is for this to reflect the zoning you have in place. I'm not sure what map you are looking at.
I got some, I mean, a neighborhood, for instance, would usually be R1. And instead it's considered a planned growth area. So you've changed the name in that way, but that area is extended beyond just a residential one area into the park and the building we're in now. All of those are planned growth areas. So why would that planned growth area eat up so many different zones? Like,
So the definition of the planned growth area is very broad, like it includes, it's meant to include mixed use districts, areas that are civic centers, like the building that we're in, sort of like a walkable, bikeable core of the municipality. And so that's why this initial draft is quite broad, because it reflects that there is the underlying zoning of this planned growth area is many different zones that we thought.
When you say we thought, it triggers my question I think I asked before, maybe I didn't make myself clear. Who did this? Why is somebody outside of Manchester deciding what the zones are? You're changing the zones.
It doesn't affect the zone front plus. It won't affect.
Changing where different definitions apply in terms of the downtown or the town center or the RR1, et cetera, et cetera. Who did this?
So it's based on a methodology that the state has required.
State didn't do this.
I made the map,
No.
but the state has spelled out the methodology that I followed. to make the map. So
With the 10 categories.
mhm,
Our zoning still exists.
Right.
It's not changing.
it won't, it
It's a
does,
mapping exercise.
Yes. Yes.
So, we've got R1 through R6,
Right.
just for argument's sake, and those get mapped to planned growth areas
yeah,
according to the methodology. So,
And
what might be useful is a slide that has our existing
zoning.
zoning and overlay on top of that how we get to this new one.
Okay.
Because it's a mapping exercise, in my opinion. That's all it is. I don't mean to trivialize it.
No,
It's
I.
huge,
no,
it's
I
a
think
huge
that's-
thing.
that's a
Thank you for
very-
doing it.
No,
but
it's a very helpful way of putting it. It's,
It hasn't changed anything in the town. It's just a
Correct.
mapping exercise. to
Correct.
Satisfy the state, so we can get to these 10 categories.
yeah, correct. And we're trying to straddle both meeting the statutory requirements, and they do spell out in some cases very specifically what is meant to be included in these areas. And so that's part of our guidance. And we did look at Manchester zoning, and that is another very important element of our guidance in deciding what the starting place is for some of these boundaries.
And if the methodology is one-to-one or many-to-one mapping, it's pretty easy. Was there any original zoning codes that were discretionary, that could go either way, that had some ambiguity, some choice? And if there were, maybe you should let us know.
Yeah, okay.
So,
I
if the board says, okay, we agree with you that R6 should go to rural development, then that's fine. But we should also know the ones that had some ambiguity
Yeah,
or some choice. Or it
Yeah.
wasn't clear cut.
okay, I understand. I think,
'Cause I think most of them are clear cut.
yeah, so for example, the clear cut, like the rural categories, we almost exactly just took the rural categories that you have already spelled out and have just changed the colors and changed the labels to match what the state's required categories are, because you have rural agriculture as a zone, and there's a rural ag and forestry category in this mapping. So like,
Does the statute prevent any municipality from managing their development with their existing codes? Or do we now have to go back to, we have to use this?
well, no, you don't have to use this for your zoning.
Okay.
It's just for sort of broad-based regional planning. So
It's really so that when everybody rolls it up, it all looks the same.
And there, just to back up even further, there is there's a future land use map for the Bennington region that exists right now. And we've just been doing it without having to meet like state needs. And so the categories are very broad. There's only 4. And it's an exercise again for the purposes of seeing a sort of regional scale of what parts of our region are urban, what parts are rural, which parts are forested. And now we're having to adapt that map to meet these requirements so that the whole state can have a sense of those things on equal footing. And it's just being made more, I think the hope is that it's made more relevant to municipalities by using it to create sort of these other processes for exemptions and for the designation programs. But understandably, that's also coming with some of the tension of making sure that municipalities have a say in what that map looks like. Whereas before it was so broad that and it was so broad and it didn't have any implications for the municipality that you didn't know it existed.
Jonathan has a question.
Thank you. I just, because I've been spending a little bit of time looking at the town designations. And to be clear, town designations such as the neighborhood designation that we have, or the village center designation, are things that are already on the books. They are things that are designations that are recognized by the state and are already qualifying us, at least in the interim, for exemptions through of Act 250 for the purposes of housing, for instance. So if you were to look at the village center, which is outlined currently in black, which does not extend down Depot Street, the village center buffer zone, which I believe is 1/4 mile
Correct.
from the village center, includes the dark purple shaded region where number 5 is currently, which is RK Miles. So this presentation, correct me if I'm wrong. Oh, I'm sorry, there's one other step. The neighborhood designation, which goes beyond that, which I believe is a half mile from the village center, includes many of the regions that we're already seeing in the lighter magenta. So it's not like these are newly formed zoning requirements. These are big picture areas where we look for growth and have already designated them through previous work, through the neighborhood designation, through the village center designations. It's just now this is a clarification of that process so that it's uniform across the state and that we're applying the same rules across the state. Is that an accurate way to put it?
Yeah, that's a helpful way of putting it. And I can also prepare some maps that show the neighborhood designated area, neighborhood development area footprint so that you can see what Jonathan's talking about, that those boundaries that are in place through your current designations are included in most of this sort of center and planned growth area. And so this is a reflection of planning work that you've already done.
Right. So it's not going to, but it ultimately, this is not like, I think, Peter, I think you were the one who said this. The zoning bylaws that that the planning commission and by de facto, obviously the select board have approved are still in place. These are, as David put it, it is sort of a mapping exercise, but it is part of a general strategy to understand where growth cannot, is less likely, is more likely to happen throughout the state. And your job is to look at the designations we already have, plus our existing zoning bylaws and how they have applied to certain areas and districts within our, or parcels within our town, and apply these new state guidelines to make them more uniform in their understanding. So really, planned growth area, yes, it might expand a little bit in some directions, but ultimately it's the same as the generalized neighborhood designation within some nuance of the words. But in general, that's the practice, right? It is that generalization for the entire state.
Yeah, and I think that's helpful. I think a helpful segue to also saying that part of what we looked at when drafting these boundaries was also your planning documents as we're updating the town plan to see where you have done work to expand water and wastewater infrastructure over the last few years, where you've done work to expand pedestrian safety amenities and bike amenities, and where there's also interest in expanding those facilities going forward. And so the center and planned growth areas also reflect those improvements that you have made and that you've articulated that you want to continue to make. And so that's part of the sort of rationale behind these areas as well. And I guess the conversation that we're hoping to have, or some of the feedback we're hoping to get, is like, do these boundaries seem too exaggerated? Is the center that were drafted here, that we're coming to you to ask about, does that center reflect the interest that has been articulated in some of your planning documents in a larger downtown area, or is that no longer an interest? And should the center be scaled back? And you don't have to have the answers tonight, but if those are some of the things that we're just hoping we did do reading on and are trying to reflect in this forward-looking document. But if it's not accurate, if it doesn't reflect what you're actually interested in anymore, then by all means, please give us that feedback and we will adjust.
And sorry, I did want to add, I'm sorry, that I believe based on this, the magenta, lighter magenta color, it looks very similar. In fact, very, very close, except I think maybe in the area of Shaw's, that it does follow pretty closely the sewer service area for the town of Manchester. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that it does appear to lay pretty closely, at least this section, in that magenta, to the places that we've already deemed accessible through our sewer services. Because obviously we expanded the line up to the town hall, town offices. MEMS is already included. It ends around Stewart's. So, with Shaw's, you can see kind of the area there in the dark purple. And then it obviously goes down through the Richfield Road area and is somewhat accessible into the Haynes Manor area. So those are areas that we've already identified, I think, through the expansion of our sewer services. So for that point, that part does make sense.
It might be helpful if those questions that you just mentioned, you could put in writing.
Okay.
Like a secret decoder, These current zoning districts equal this.
Yes. Okay. I can definitely prepare those.
I think the complexity of the map is our existing zoning categories with an overlay of sewer and water,
Yeah.
because that helps you start to understand where the extensions can be. And then somehow color coding or mapping them out so we can see this overlay.
Okay.
I think that would be really helpful.
Okay.
And then, if there are other additional, sewer projects in the next sort of 5 to 10 years that we need to be thinking about, I'm assuming, maybe wrongly, but that might go into some of the transitional or infill areas as well.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of,
Be good to sort of level set everybody on what those three components of the map are.
okay.
Yeah, really helpful. Yeah. Help explain a lot.
Okay. That's really helpful. You're our first meeting going through this process, so I appreciate your feedback on the process itself. And
Yeah, I think these meetings are short on time and it's easy to jump to the answer, which is kind of the way you present it. I think for people like me, I need like what are the three? I'm going to use the word steps, but that's probably not the right word given the context of what you've presented already. But how did we get here?
yeah.
Maybe start with here's your zoning, here's your sewer, here's the mapping. That's where we're at.
Okay. Thank you.
Maybe try that on your next municipality.
Yeah.
See if that is any better.
One of the reasons we're, presenting to you first,
Because we're the nicest.
well, that, and, we're already working on your town plan update and, as Sam said, it's, this is more of a regional effort, but it does dovetail with, the town plan. One of the things we are updating for your town plan is making it Act 181 compliant. That's part of our agreement. And so we have some information, in there about that. And so it just seemed like, a natural fit to also use this opportunity where we're already working with you on your town plan to talk about the more regional effort that we're undertaking and as it relates to Manchester and the town plan. That's one of the reasons why we're here. And, even though there's still things developing, like the land use review board still needs to meet, needs to be rulemaking. But, we have this opportunity to, engage with you since we're already doing the town plan work, so.
And I think to that end, if you do have thoughts on the different tiers or the different steps of the designation program, that would be helpful for us to hear as we're refining sort of the town plan update draft, that if you feel strongly about pursuing a certain level of exemption or a certain step, that would be good to know so that we can include that language in the draft that we present to you.
I think the overlays that David talked about would be helpful, very helpful, and being able to compare this to what sits on the wall in the town offices that's very detailed and large would help us. And obviously, you're not expecting many answers tonight, right?
No, it's okay.
Yeah,
Please feel
so-
free to.
The 1A has got a 1/4 mile radius, is that?
So though, I think there are exemptions that are sort of in place right now, the interim exemptions that I think Jonathan mentioned. And that's a 1/4 mile on the current village center boundary, but the eventual 1A exemption would be just the boundary that we all can agree upon.
How
So,
much wiggle room do we have for picking the center of that 1/4 mile radius?
so right now, the center is whatever the current boundaries are. So
Okay.
this black outline is
Okay.
the basis for
But
the interim exemptions that are in place. But I think there's flexibility to extend your current village center in a way that makes sense. So it doesn't just have, that's just the interim Act 250 exemptions, but that doesn't have to be the center that you agree on for a future land use map.
So the way I think about it is we have a village center designation,
Mhm,
and that has some boundaries to it, whether it's, 1/4 mile or whatever it is.
mhm.
But tier 1A is actually based on sewer, water, and sophisticated zoning laws. So you could actually have a village center, but also apply for a tier 1A that's maybe a different size because you have infrastructure, sewer, water, and sophisticated zoning planning laws that you could apply for a designation of 1A.
Yes,
And that could be the village center plus.
yes, and that's sort of where the planned growth area.
Right. So, we should just be clear on that it's the village center is the village center. And tier 1A could be the village center plus.
Mhm.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Is that,
All
is
right.
that, is that correct? I don't know if
Yes,
that's right. It
yes,
sounds right.
It
I
is,
don't know if
yeah,
it is.
your instinct is
Because the criteria for village center is different from 1A, tier 1A.
correct. Yeah. Yes. Mhm.
Can I jump in just for
Mhm.
Please.
David, thank you for saying that and phrasing it the way in which you just did, because I think that's really helpful. Plus, if we move in this direction, does this not give us more autonomy and more local control over what is and isn't built within our town, in terms of not having to go to the state?
I would imagine so, yes.
That's the
1A allows
Right.
you to be exempt from Act 250, which is a whole bunch of oversight that we probably,
Yeah, it would be, that permitting would be contained at a
local
local.
level, right?
And that's all the one A does is the Act 250 exemption. That's it.
Mhm.
That's not, I mean, when you say all, that's
Well,
a pretty
yes,
big
but-
deal, I think.
I mean, it is and it isn't because not all development is subject to Act 250. So then, you're sort of bifurcating things to begin with. So it's not, my point is simply that it's not all development that's going to be affected by that. Just development that's necessarily going to trigger Act 250. It needs to be fairly, large and it meets certain criteria. So
That's true, yeah.
smaller things will not be affected.
Yeah.
It's not like a blanket, like it's not going to affect all development, just. Yeah, right.
To the permitting building that Act 250 applies to, you get an exemption from that.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's a good.
Right.
good-
Can I also ask a hypothetical question, maybe a hypothetical question? But let's say that we decide that we want to move in the direction of tier 1A. It is approved. Who then
Did we lose him? What happened?
We lost you, Jonathan.
Lost you.
I didn't know what was
Who
like,
then?
pause,
You think we
period.
did that?
Thomas, can you hear us?
Funny, I was like, is he just thinking? I thought he was cogitating there for a minute.
In the middle of while it was.
Yeah.
Pause. It was a
Who
pregnant
then?
pause, I thought.
It's funny because I'm sitting here listening to him twice because I can hear him sitting next to me and also in the same room. So it's a little weird. Can you get it?
Tell us what he said.
Yeah.
Jonathan.
He's so
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so my AirPods, I guess the battery's dead. I don't know where I left off, but the end of my question was, let's say we get to that point. Let's say we did want to pursue tier 1A. What does that then look like at the local level? Who then makes these decisions about these larger projects that would have typically triggered the Act 250, or I guess we could maybe start calling it Act 181? Is that DRB? Is that the Planning Commission? Is that the Select Board? Do we know those answers?
That's a good question.
Typically it would be the DRB, I would imagine, but I don't know.
I think
Aren't they in our bylaws? I mean, in our ordinances, those answers?
it would probably be a mixture of the appropriate municipal boards and staff. And one of the requirements for tier 1A is to demonstrate that you have that adequate staffing capacity to accommodate those sort of permitting needs in-house.
But wouldn't that be answered by by ordinances?
I'm not sure because Act 250 permits are beyond local permitting processes right now.
For example, building height, that's in our ordinance.
Oh, sorry, that would still be
And-
governed by your local zoning.
We're obviously not going to have to really answer any water or sewer issues because that's part of step 1A. That's tier 1A. So I would think that it's, maybe I'm saying this wrong, but it's a rubber stamp by either the DRB or the PC or the select board to rubber stamp something because all of it will be predetermined by our qualification to 1A and by our ordinances.
It's a judicial decision, I would imagine.
I imagine, I guess I don't know the exact process, but I think you're I'm going to say, I think you're probably both right in the sense that it doesn't, your local zoning bylaws are still in play and still the local regulations that govern land use decisions. And there would be sort of an added permitting that takes the place of what the current Act 250 permitting process is outside of the municipality. I just don't know exactly what the mechanism would be at the local level, but
But that's a local level.
it would be that, it would become a local permitting.
But I think we have to articulate what that process is. If we're in tier 1A and there's a project that comes up that is exempt from 250, I think we have to be really clear
Yeah.
on what that process
If it's
is.
be prepared to get there. Right?
Yeah,
Yeah, and I will look into that and get back to you, but it's also possible that there will be further rulemaking.
oh, it's 2 years away.
Yeah.
I mean, you know.
That there would be.
We got time, we got
guidance,
time.
Yeah,
I think for
but
May, we
it's a
just
very
need,
good.
for May, we just need to be able to say, we think we would like to,
Yeah.
So I
A,
have
B,
a,
or C.
I have a question on this as it relates to towns that aren't going through a review or their town plan re-up. How does, say, Arlington, how does Arlington deal with this now? They've got a different timetable, or they don't have to do it by May, or what's the status? How do?
So we're going to meet with the planning commissions for all of the municipalities in the region. We're doing Manchester, Landgrove, and Bennington first because you're all working on town plan updates. But then I imagine that it would be a very similar conversation with Arlington about the process for how the map was developed and getting their feedback on how they want to see their center or their planned growth area boundaries reflected in this eventual map, but they won't have to necessarily update their plan right away. It'll be more of a conversation where the map reflects those interests.
So it's not possible for us to have the same timetable and constraints, restrictions as Arlington does, which is a lot less than we have, i.e. in terms of timing of adopting these new regulations.
Oh, I mean, I think if you wanted to continue changing the map in 8 months, we certainly could. I think we came to you early so that you can take this into consideration in the town plan update so that the town plan can have the best reflection of where this like future land use map is going and sort of incorporating these new elements. But I don't think we will be done with this future land use process until next year. And so there's nothing set in stone. Like if you wanted to continue to adjust the boundaries of these land use categories in Manchester, that's perfectly acceptable. It was more just so that your document can have incorporated this, but our document can continue to change with your input after your town plan has been adopted.
I guess I don't mean to be difficult. I'm looking at it from the standpoint of you have a town that's going through a town plan revision and you have many towns that aren't. Those that aren't have much a lot more ability to look at this and try to work with it and understand it and apply for it without a time constraint. We have a really significant time constraint, which it seems to be a negative for us versus the town that isn't going through their town plan.
I guess I'm not sure what the constraint or what do you mean by?
We've got a really tough timetable
Yeah.
to adopt the 4 components that have come down from Montpelier, right? Because we're changing our town plan, they have to be incorporated into a town plan that has really difficult timetable. Yet, out of the 241 towns in the state, or whatever the number is, only a 7th of them are going through their town plan revisions. All of those that aren't going through their town plan of revisions don't have this really restrictive, difficult timetable. Is there a flexibility for us regarding that? Can we look at these 4 components as a addendum to our town plan, totally separate addendum, and then just not have this timetable problem that we have trying to understand this and do this? Am I not making any sense here?
I'm not sure what 4.
Are you talking about the 4 like components in our agreement for updating the town plan?
Yes.
So the towns that don't have, aren't updating their town plan, don't have any timetable, Callie.
I'm sorry, I'm still also trying to parse what I think you're asking. I mean, basically, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think like what we're looking for from you for your town plan update is just, are you interested or not? And like, and if you are, like, we'll include a statement in your town plan that's like, the town of Manchester is interested in pursuing tier 1A or tier 1B. You know, and having that in your plan, and then after your town plan is approved and adopted, we can still continue to iterate on these maps that Sam is showing you right now, because again, what she's talking about here is more a regional level planning effort. So, you know, it does have, you know, dovetail. We wanted to get this in front of you while we're working on your town plan, but we can continue to have this conversation and iterate on these maps after your town plan has been adopted. The main decision, if you can call it a decision, is for your town plan is whether or not you're interested in pursuing one of the tiers, and just having that information in there so that, you know, you don't have to, you know, wait for another opportunity to update your town plan to have that in there. So, I mean, I guess you do have more of a timetable of just deciding whether or not you're interested. But in terms of the timetable for your input on the maps that Sam is showing you, it's no different than the other towns, because, you know, we can continue to have these conversations after your town plan. This is an effort that goes beyond just your town plan.
So
It relates to it, but it's bigger than just your town plan.
And to follow up on Wilbur's question, if you look at our town plan, part 2, the land use plan, which you probably looked at to do this. So this is the official land use map 5.1. Are these categories still staying in the town plan, or are the 10 categories that you presented here today replacing this?
I think I guess our recommendation would be to move towards what will be sort of the regional plan, but I don't think it's required to use these categories in a municipal plan. So for consistency's sake, I think there would be a benefit to having the same categories across the two, but it's not.
So it's not required if we update this land use plan.
Don't think so. If you like that one a lot.
That's not what I envisioned, or that's not what I thought I was listening to here. I thought we were being told that we're going to be adopting these right out here in this new mapping thing, and that's therefore going to take the place of what we have here.
I think
There's a subtle difference though, I think. I think we have to adopt these 10 categories.
Right, which means
But
that
then
we're,
at the ordinance level, you can.
But not
we can
right now.
still- We can still have the existing ones that we have. You might want to have, I think so. There's
mean,
no requirement to change those.
Well, this
As
has
long
the
as you can-
neighborhood residential lands, which we said we're getting rid of the.
As long as
neighborhood
you map them
category
over.
Designation.
I think
We
it would
clearly map them.
I think it would be, for consistency's sake, I think it would be good to have the same categories, but what we're looking at, like the future land use map is a regional map. And so we're just looking at Manchester because we're just talking about Manchester, but
Here's a follow-up. In your rewrite that you're going to do, the BCRCs, are you planning to replace this map, or are you keeping this map?
you're going to move to this right here.
I mean, I think it will be, I don't know, I had not updated that map yet. I guess like, I would be inclined to use this map with these with the updated categories, or some version of these updated categories. And it could be, if we wanted to use categories that are more in line with what your zoning ordinance language is, because that feels more accessible to have those categories. I think that is possible too, but I haven't updated that map because I guess the hope was that having a conversation about the categories in that come out of the future land use mapping process would be a helpful sort of direction for updating the land use map in the town plan. Is that?
You might have said this already, maybe I missed it. So you've come up with the map and you guys have the rules pretty much, what needs to be done. You presented some stuff on the board, bullet points. How far are we away from getting it finalized for our town plan?
The map or the
Oh,
town plan?
What you guys are working on? I mean, it seems like you have a lot of it together. And
We're still planning to have a draft for you by February 3rd.
so a month away pretty much.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. So I think in terms of the map,
I'm still not clear whether you're gonna replace it or
Can I-
not. I gotta be
So-
honest.
yeah,
Can I
Can-
do an
And
overlay?
this is my section that I've been like ruminating about, so that's why I want to hold off, and I think I'll just hold off and see what you do before I make further changes. Because I don't want to change it and then have you guys do something different, and then we have two drafts that are
So
conflict.
maybe this is a clarification that I think I'm gathering from everyone. Our town plan is a municipal plan. It has requirements that need to be approved, reviewed, accepted by the regional commission that are in compliance with state guidelines. In our municipal town plan, which speaks to our goals as a municipality, we have a map which outlines our land use. The potential is that land use document, that map,
mhm,
is in fact a separate entity than this regional plan.
correct.
And that the regional plan, the goal of this regional plan is to create these very clear guidelines that outline things across the state. But for our own purposes in our municipality, we can have technically a different map. But the argument is that, and why you came to us first, is that we could be potentially in a better position to look at some of this and say, here's a way for us to integrate these things that are already coming down, whether we're in an 8-month time crunch or whether it's 8 years. The fact is that if we utilize some of the same terminology, or whether we have generalized input that we can imply, I think you've said multiple times, we intend, or we would like to apply for 1A, or we would like to do this, or we would be interested in expanding a transitionary zone or a planned growth area to this area. It doesn't necessarily state that we have to have a definitive map that says, here's all the zoning ordinances and they have to be in all these places and they have to be approved by May 8th when our plan expires. We just have to, it would make sense and it would be in our best interest if we could incorporate some of the pieces that are already coming on a regional level, on a state level, so that it is clearer to, I can't tell you how many times I've looked at either, this map generator from the state or that map generator from the state, because they use different colors, or instead of like clear outlines, they use a blob, or they might say village center versus village opportunity zone or something like that. It makes something that's already very layered and convoluted even more layered and convoluted. So if we can start to incorporate some of these things in a document that is coming all the way already, I mean, we could even potentially, in my view, let's just say that we aren't comfortable with making any directions towards, I think these boundaries go too far, whatever the case is. For our map, we could simply take what is already town designations, right, for our land use map, on the places, like you said already, the rural agricultural and whatnot, those are pretty well defined, right? Those are not staying. It's these closer, more dense areas, the village centers, the neighborhood areas. we take what we already have, what's already like at this moment, and just anywhere that the current designation of a quarter-mile radius of the current village center, mark those in and call them, instead of calling it neighborhood, call it planned growth area. And then we can just leave it at that, because it's not like we're changing anything. We're just changing the name. And then we could say, we do see that there could be an expansion of growth in certain areas in the coming in the future. And we would hope to expand it even further. All in all, our town plan is a municipal town plan. This map is not dictating what is in our municipal town plan. It could benefit us as a municipality if we had some cohesiveness with the regional plan, because of that terminology being more commonly used across everything.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Is that helpful?
Very, yeah.
Joanne has a question.
I heard what you said, Jonathan, and it makes sense. But what if all of the designations we have now sort of are ignored in the new document, neighborhood, village? What if we just stuck with what we have, what we know we have, and then say, yes, we're interested in making these changes. We're going to write an addendum to the plan once these official designations have been available. Because what I'm wondering is, if you do that, is it going to confuse people? If you're changing the names and the language and the incentives that come with them, will they stay with us as we move to the next iteration of these designations?
Right, because we still have 2 years, right? We still have 2
Right.
years of those designations,
Right.
like neighborhood. So,
Joanne,
January 1st, 2027 is when that
Right. So
ends.
none of that will change until the regional plan is done, which you say is going to be a couple of more years anyway. Is that right?
Yeah, the current timeline is that we would have to submit and have it approved by the end of 2026.
Joanne, I want to respond to your comment. One of the interpretations or impressions that I think a lot of this planning commission has gotten in studying the town plan is that it's difficult, and the ordinances even more so, it's difficult to understand and abide by and work with. And I worry about it here. I'm having difficulty understanding and comprehending all of this. I suspect others are going to also. And I think that should be kept in mind. This is not simple. And to translate from this to this, or to translate from our definitions in here to this, is not going to be an immediate thing. I mean, you obviously aren't going to get answers to the major questions here, except we hope to be able to qualify for reduction from, or some sort of leniency from Act 250 restrictions, because we have a lot of this already in place in our core. But this isn't easy. And I'm concerned about that.
Do you think we may have to extend the time on this?
That's what I'm saying. That's why I say leave it as is. Leave it as is. Use the maps you have
Need a motion to go to.
and work on these and write an addendum. Just tell them that we're interested, and because I don't know if the next 2 years, when these exemptions and the incentives that go with them, do we want to keep them in place? Is it a problem if we change those designations?
Let us take some time to answer that question, but I don't think that we can't just ignore this. We have to study it and give commentary on it and hopefully adopt it. But it's not going to be an overnight thing, Joan.
No, that's why I'm saying.
I've been asked to ask everybody here whether we want to go for a little bit more time here. Do we need a motion for that?
Sam,
Do
how
a
much
motion
longer
for
do you
that?
need?
Oh, just, no, I'm
Mo-
done sharing everything
Okay.
I brought, so it's
Are
just.
you done with us or not?
Yeah, I think so. I think this was a good
Do you want-
discussion and I can,
Much-
prepare the materials we talked about. I'm happy to field more questions and conversation if that would be helpful,
don't-
but
Why don't I ask for a motion to extend this meeting until 7:20? Is there one?
I motion we extend the meeting till 7:20.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
I,
Aye. All righty.
And you're gonna circulate this, right, Samantha?
yeah, and I'm gonna also prepare some of the maps, other maps of showing the relationship between this draft and the zoning that you have in place and your sewer service area.
Are there any other comments or questions from people who are on Zoom?
Yeah, I just want to say that the difference between the two maps really, I kind of generally speaking agree with everyone that I don't think there's any particular rush to start rephrasing things and remapping things. I do agree that in the long run that our language and maps should match the region. But the bigger question and the more important question that I think that we can take advantage of here and flip this a little bit and think about it in a more positive way is that, yes, we may be in a time crunch to get our town plan written and approved, but this is also a fantastic opportunity where we're already working with regional planners who are looking at the changes to what I would personally start referring to as Act 181, not necessarily Act 250, so that we can begin incorporating that language that the two of them have been talking about for the last hour or so, so that if and I at this point don't see why we, or at least from a personal perspective, why I wouldn't or we wouldn't want to pursue that tier 1A status. So knowing that we are the first town that they've come to, we are already working on updating our document. And yes, we are in a time crunch, but they're already doing this work for us. And if we can, between the five of us, come to a consensus as to whether or not that's the direction we want to head, they can then begin incorporating that language into the town plan for us. That does not mean that we have to apply for it, but knowing that they're already doing this work, that gives us an opportunity to be like, hey, it's already here. And then we can say we would or would not like to apply for it. So I'd like to, take this as an opportunity to be like, yeah, we're in a time crunch, but there's a positive to this. And I think we're in a good place.
Any other comments from the Zoom attendees? And anything else from Sam? How about Callie?
I'll just say again that we'll be back at February 3rd with a draft.
So it would be helpful for us, I think, if we had a more frequent communication back and forth with you as to the status of the work that you're doing and Sam's doing.
Sure.
What frequency would that?
Yeah, I guess since we have like.
I don't think it's-
weeks until we deliver the draft, so. What did you have in mind in terms of?
It'd be nice if, as you finalize things, or a certain parts of it are finalized for you in the draft. If those pieces were sent out, that would be helpful, I know, for her, for what she's working on. So as you finish certain parts of it, if they could be sent, that would be, I think that's what we're getting at.
Yeah, I think the way we've been working right now is Sam and I are working on a Word document that we basically are both contributing to and editing and making comments to. But I think, if we have a specific section, we might have a few sections that we can share as we finalize them. I know that we kind of have comments and edits throughout the document. So, but I think, within the next few weeks, we're gonna, be pretty close to finalizing certain sections. And we can, share them as we finalize a specific section. But I think, you won't be able to see everything as a whole until February 3rd. But we might be able to share specific sections.
Anything to update us would be helpful. Maybe it's best to communicate with Peter. Would that be right?
Or Elias. Yeah,
Elias,
either one.
do one.
Yeah. Both of you. Yeah, usually when I email, I'm
CC.
emailing both of you, yeah. So,
And it sounds like there's somewhat of a consensus with respect to including that opt-in language.
Okay,
No.
for the,
Opt-in language, I don't know what.
Yeah, so the tier, what,
This-
you're
This right
interested
here?
in tier one?
Tier 1A.
yes,
Yep.
Yeah,
yeah.
tier 1A, sorry.
Do we,
Are you referring to the tier 1A or are you referring to this language versus what's in the book?
no, just the tier 1A that we have to opt in. And so at the beginning, there was a conversation about whether that should be included in your draft.
Mhm.
And then Tom's was just saying it sounded like we should include that. I just wondered if we should give them the green light while they're here.
Is that something we do or the select board does?
Yeah, you give them the green light, that's your interest.
It seemed to me that we want to take advantage of all the work that's already in place in the town plan that qualifies us to be in tier 1A.
Yes.
I
yeah,
agree.
great, great,
Agreed.
great. Then we'll make sure that language is included.
And then specifically to the steps, which is what's the step situation?
So step 2 is what sort of where you're currently at or where you would currently be with the village center designation. And step 3 is the one beyond it, which is akin to the current downtown designation program. And based on the current town plan and some of the planning documents that were done in the interim, it seems like in the past, there's been some interest in pursuing a downtown designation in Manchester. So I don't know if that's an ongoing interest. It would require some elements like having an identified downtown organization and having like a downtown improvement plan. So but again, those things wouldn't need to be done. It's just some things that you would sort of want to call out in the plan to say if you're interested in that next level of benefits.
Sounds,
I'd be interested in that.
yeah, I mean, certainly.
Do you want to memorialize that minutes with a vote?
I'm not sure I'm ready to do that just because I don't think I have the proper understanding of all the different impacts that could have. But I certainly do want to go into the tier 1A to take advantage of the reduction in Act 250
Mhm.
problems. But besides that, I'd rather have a little time to think about this second portion of that.
Okay.
And which step specifically which step is that?
That's step 3,
Three.
which is sort of the highest level of that set of elements.
Is it possible to get more information on that so that we all feel comfortable with?
Yeah, I can send, one of the documents I'm referring to is a summary of Act 181 legislation from the state's Department of Housing and Community Development. So I can include that as an attachment. And then again, some of the benefits were sort of vague, so I can't speak to those much more, but hopefully that helps just with giving everyone a chance to peruse.
Ready?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you both
Thanks,
so
Annie.
much.
Sure. Thank you.
You want to hold on to some of?
Yeah, I'll take one and Peter, yeah.
Okay,
that thing.
thank you.
Thank you.
You're getting that presentation.
Yeah.
Yes, I asked twice to
you.
You should have you come to all our meetings. I feel like you're a great interpreter.
You're organized.
Well, one last thing though, I think what you're hearing from the commission here, sort of some anxiety over receiving something on February 3rd and giving us time to process it. And I think one of the things that I have relied on a lot is the phrase less today versus more tomorrow.
Mhm.
So the smaller bits you can give us between now and February 3rd versus waiting to February 3rd would be really helpful. So less today versus more tomorrow is
Yeah.
that's how I think about it.
Yeah, I think we'll be able to get you some sections.
I appreciate it.
In advance of February 3rd, but again, don't know if we'll be able to give you the complete package prior to
No, so.
February.
Don't expect that. And I'll certainly tell you, speaking for myself, I won't speak for everybody else, but when we received less today, we can't judge it. So we're just really looking to absorb and learn from the content that you're sending us. As opposed to thinking it's 100% complete, which is not.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have to approve minutes of our December 16th meeting, which you have in front of you.
I just have one
Motion.
edit.
Okay,
We're missing one of the Zoom attendees, so if we could just add Jonathan West,
I can do that, yeah.
you know, really not important pieces of information.
That was very good, Thomas.
Hey,
All
by
right,
the
with that-
way,
With that.
it's my 1 year anniversary. I don't know if anyone,
Oh, yeah.
So.
I'm excited. Heidi's here.
Can I get a motion to accept the minutes?
I motion to accept the minutes.
I'll second it.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. That's a 5-0, okay? I want to read a statement regarding our session we had after the planning commission meeting where we went into executive session. And this came from our lawyer. It says, at its December 16th meeting, the planning commission entered into an executive session, which in hindsight was not consistent with the statute. The meeting was brief, no action was taken. The planning commission chair has reviewed the open meeting provision, including the statute pertaining to executive session, as conferred with the town council to avoid a similar use in the future. One of the factors here, this was written by the town council. One of the factors is that we can't go into executive session on a contract that we didn't partake of or be involved in doing. The contract between the town and BCRC was done by the select board. So they're the ones that could have gone into executive session to discuss it. There's also confusion as to what we can go into executive session for. It says in the rules and procedures of the planning commission that it's to address personnel issues and what was the other one?
Commission members.
Commission members' performance. I'm not sure that we can do that. So, and then I consulted with somebody who deals with Robert's rules a lot, and they threw another curve at it and said, Robert's rules may not apply to municipal meetings. So, but it's also probably worthwhile asking the Vermont Leagues and Cities Commission what we can and cannot do. So we will do that. So,
Do we need to do anything with this?
no, she said,
We're just gonna make it.
it's no problem, but
It'll be folded into the minutes for the next meeting.
yeah,
Is that a slap wrist?
no.
I feel like I'm getting a slap wrist here.
And just to be clear,
Just to be, yeah.
as of now, we can only go into executive session for personnel issues or to discuss
Commission members.
I don't think we can.
at all.
I don't know, but I don't.
If you have a
think we-
problem with myself or LIS, you would say,
Yes.
go into an
yes, we can
executive
do that.
session and, kind of give us the slap on the hand and then reconvene and
So no more
All those
executive
good.
sessions.
Right.
That's what I'm
That's
hearing.
what it
So-
sounds like.
No more executive sessions.
pretty much.
Okay.
Alrighty, we had on the agenda, open discussion of PC members. And I handed out some notes, just personal notes that I had made in going over the town plan as it relates to the areas that I said I would try to do some work on. And I'll just leave it with you at that. And then,
Which section is that for, Wilbur?
right here.
Yes, no, I have it, but is it?
It overlaps with what you were talking about.
That's what
It
I meant.
is overlaps. You had utilities, water, sewer, and solid waste. And then I had community services and facilities. And in part of, I didn't really touch on utilities, but I did talk about water, sewer, and I didn't really get to solid waste at all. And I have not gotten to write anything. I don't think there's anything here about communities. I don't know what community services facilities really means, to be honest with you, but I gave you some notes here that you might want to look at
Yeah.
and help. And then Leon and I met with John Burnham and at the Manchester Business Association to talk about economic development. We really didn't talk much about employment, but there's some notes from that, and we can talk about it now, or we can talk about it some other time, whatever you want. And we're not done.
Yeah, I know. I ran out of my house today and left my notebook on my desk, which I'd gotten out of my car. I thought it was in my car. Got out of the car earlier to talk to you about it, and then I left it at home. So I didn't want to be late even later than I was and go back and get it. So I don't have all my notes with me. But I do know that we came up with some pretty good ideas, actionable ideas on things we can do to boost economic growth and increase tourism and whatnot. So we had some pretty good direction to get started on that. So I'm excited about it.
We send those notes to Elias and create a Google document.
Yeah, we can get all that together.
I think I already gave them to him.
Yeah.
Gave them to Peter, didn't I?
Can you send me a electronic?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
There's one more item. We want to set a public hearing for February 10th. But I just want to make sure that we're okay on doing that. That's the next regular scheduled meeting, right? Or one of the scheduled meetings for planning commission.
Now, if we are not making a lot of, right now we're discussing changes for the town plan further down the road. But if we are not making any major changes other than the cover letter for the approval of the town plan that's upcoming, do we need to have all the public input and whatnot, or is it still required?
It's the same requirements.
But I'm saying what I think the public's going to be very upset to find out when they show up in a meeting that they came to a meeting, we made no changes. Here they are at another meeting and we're making none of their recommendations or changes in the town plan. So it feels like we're going to have a lot of angry attendees. I know it's required.
This is a one-word change for our ordinance. And if we're going to change the one word, we still have to have a public hearing.
Public hearing.
And we can come up with some kind of verbiage in that to maybe help people understand that our hands are tied basically with the timetable.
Timetable, okay.
So, and they have to understand, we've taken in the information, we'll disseminate it. We will be working towards that in the next iteration, but I don't know if there's a lot of time to.
Right, yeah, okay. So we could still take recommendations and ideas.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's.
That door is never closed. If there's somebody that has an idea, they can always bring it to the
We
planning.
could even touch on some of the things we've come up with them so far.
Absolutely. And I think it's a great idea to put a spin on it with that. Say, this is how we interpreted your input.
So I didn't understand the date that you just came up with.
February 10th is just, I think it's 2 meetings away, right?
What, for a public hearing?
For a public hearing. I need to get it in the paper for Thursday publication. So I have to give them a go ahead tomorrow.
And can we use the library again?
I beg pardon?
The library again?
I don't really care about the venue.
Ooh, I think the public hearing that he's talking about is the pay for parking change in wording in that ordinance. But is that still, are we still moving forward with that? or-
That's not a town plan meeting. That's a separate meeting.
It has to be a
The
public
hearing.
hearing because it's a change to the ordinance.
Change to the ordinance
Let's
required.
do that here.
It's easier for us to do it here.
Here.
Hmm, okay,
Hey, what about a next planning commission meeting?
That's typically what we've been doing, 2 weeks.
yeah,
To the 20th?
I will not be in, I'll
but that's Martin Luther King.
be gone.
Well,
then.
that's a holiday. Can we do it Tuesday?
That's select board meeting here. And DRB is on Wednesday, correct?
Yes.
We do Thursday of that week?
I'm up.
Yeah, that should be fine.
23rd? Or is that yeah, 23rd?
Yeah, as long as we can double check and make sure there's no conflict, but yeah.
I will not be able to attend, but
you guys are welcome to start the meeting.
2 weeks from today is the 20th,
Yes.
Yeah.
so that wouldn't be the 25th.
No,
No, it's Martin Luther King Day, so the office is
Okay.
closed.
I know that. but I mean,
the
the
Thursday would be the
Thursday,
23rd.
23rd, right. So you won't be here, but is the 23rd acceptable to others?
Subject to any conflicts, right?
Yep.
Thomas, did you hear that?
I did. I'm looking at my calendar right now. If you give me a second. Yeah, that should be fine for me.
Okay, so we're gonna have a meeting on the 23rd, Thursday. 5:30 here. Any other business? Do I have a motion?
Motion to adjourn?
Yes. Seconded?
I second
All
it.
in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
That's it.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
So you came back with the tan.
Recording stopped.
Didn't want to come back. It was-
Aye.